The Start Your Own Business podcast. Hear inspiring startup stories and get reliable expert advice on how to start your business and get off to the best possible start. Brought to you by Startup Donut, helping small businesses succeed.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. You're listening to the Start Your Own Business podcast. My name's Fiona Pryor and I'm your host. In this episode, I'll be speaking to Greg Fraser, founder of the Bottled Baking Company, which is based in Leeds. You might have come across Greg's products already. They're stocked in a number of high street shops including John Lewis, Selfridges, Fenwick, New Look and Oliver Bonas, as well as a wide range of smaller independent retailers here in the UK. The Bottled Baking Company sells ready-measured baking mixes in a wide range of mouth-watering flavours. The bottles contain all the dry ingredients you need to create delicious cookies, cakes, brownies and tray bakes, all conveniently gathered in a bottle. All you need to do is to add your own butter, egg and milk, and it's an easy and fun way to bake. In fact, I'd say it's a perfect way to bake with kids. So how did Greg come up with the idea? What key startup challenges did he face? And how did he get so many retailers, both large and small, to stock his products? And how did he manage to become so successful so quickly? These are some of the questions I'll be asking Greg. But before we meet him, let's hear from the sponsor of this episode of the Start Your Own Business podcast.
Want to be more successful when starting or running your own business? You need the donuts. No, not the little deep-fried dough balls filled with jam. I mean the 5 donut small business advice websites: startup, marketing, money, law and tech. Together they attract more than 1 million visitors each year, people just like you. Each donut website is packed with top tips and reliable information, which we hope will help you to be more successful when starting and running your own business. You can also access money-saving offers and time-saving tools while learning and gaining inspiration from other small business owners. Head over to www.startupdonut.co.uk and you can download a special startup guide that provides a checklist of key tasks you need to complete when starting your own business. Visit www.startupdonut.co.uk today. It could be one of the best business decisions you ever make.
So it's time to meet our guest, Greg Fraser of the Bottled Baking Company. Hi there, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Hiya, thanks for having me.
So for anyone who may not have come across your products before, I wondered if you could start by explaining a little bit about what it is that you create.
Sure, yeah. So the Bottled Baking Co. is made up of a few different parts nowadays, but originally we started off with baking kits in a glass bottle, layered. So you kind of got the layered ingredients in a nice glass bottle, which makes it look pretty, but also tastes great when you bake it. So it's a nice talking point and a nice sort of thing to gift to somebody or use as a baking activity with the kids and the family.
Fab. And before you started the business, what were you doing? So this, I take it that the Bottled Baking Company is a change of direction for you. So perhaps could you give us a little bit of background about what you were doing beforehand?
Yeah, so directly before I was working for Sky on their website. So I kind of worked with a team of web developers and I was the bit in between the web developers and the business. And we would make new things appear on the website, I guess, and like make customers' journey nice and that kind of thing. So I was working there. And around the same time, maybe slightly just before I started there, actually, started doing the Bottled Baking Co. just as a hobby to get me to food festivals. Basically, I like to go to food festivals and see all the food and stuff there that you can get. And and it was an excuse to go to them, I suppose. And I thought people might like this as a concept. I can probably go into more detail in a minute, I guess, but went there to sort of test whether people would like to buy them. And then, they did. So I kind of carried on doing my old job and the Bottled Baking Co. just as a hobby initially, because that's all it was. It was just intended initially just to be a little thing to keep me going to events on the weekend every now and then.
So it started as a side hustle. What was it about the business that convinced you that there might be something a bit more kind of serious and, like an official business there?
So I mean, the first market I went to was in Leeds, and it was Kirkstall Deli Market, and it's fairly small. It's just in the old ruins of an abbey, and there's probably 20 stalls, maybe not even that, and it's all sort of craft stalls, people making their own things and food to eat on the go. So I took my first batch of products down there, had I think it was 3 flavours I started with, maybe 4, 3 flavours, and then took 10 of each for the Saturday. It was only a 3-hour show, I think, on the Saturday and 3 hours on the Sunday over lunchtime, and sold all 30 that I took on the Saturday, which I thought would last Saturday and Sunday. By the time I left on the Saturday, so then had to rush home and via all the supermarkets and buy as much flour and sugar and whatever I needed as possible to see what else I could make with what labels and stuff I had left, because I didn't order very many to start with. And went back the next day and sold out again, which was good. So carried on going to that market I think it was every month maybe when they did that market, and kept doing that for a few months. And then had an inquiry through Instagram for a deli that was near my house, asking if they could buy wholesale because they'd seen them at the market that I was at. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess. I had no idea what that would mean and how to price it, like so that it worked for them and worked for me, and then what sort of volumes they would want. I mean, in fairness, it was fairly small, but at the time it seemed like a decent number. And gave them a figure, and they liked that number, and they became the first stockist. So there was never really an intention to sell to retailers. That wasn't. There was no plan of this at all. It just everything's happened organically, and that was the first retailer. So after that sort of experience of selling out on the market, and then a retailer, a small one, granted, but that's fine, get in touch. We thought, well, maybe there's a bit more to this, and sort of just again carried on, but not with any plan. It just sort of kept going into it, and people would contact us asking to buy things rather than me going out there actively selling.
Right. Which
is an interesting way of doing it, but that's what happened.
Yeah, but I guess you've got kind of proof of market, really. If people are coming to you and you're selling out in what is to all intents and purposes, as you describe yourself, a bit of a hobby, a bit of a cottage business. If you've got that proof of pudding. So what were the first steps then when you realised that actually there could be something more substantial to this? How did you go about setting the business up then?
So the business wasn't actually set up as a business for probably a year. It was just me doing it. There was no accounts. There was no registered company or anything for a while. And then I kind of thought, well, actually, I should probably do it the right way. So so I could invoice people under the Bottle Bacon Co, not just send them a Word template from my computer. So we set up the proper company, but it was all from home. So everything was made in my kitchen at home. It's not a commercial kitchen, just a normal kitchen. And I was sending parcels out, from the kitchen initially as well, and then eventually the garage after a little while. So I had a little bit of stock made, but I was just producing to order. So if anyone ordered online or any shops ordered, I didn't hold any stock, really, finished stock. I would just make it and send it to them. And I guess over the first sort of the biggest change, actually the biggest catalyst was a distributor got in touch one year just after Christmas, looking to take stock for the following Christmas, but they had to get it in their catalogue like within a few weeks. And I wasn't sure if it was genuine, if I wanted to start with. I was like, well, what is this? Because they were talking quite large numbers. It was like 1,000 bottles, and that was massive at the time. And I was like, that seems unrealistic. But okay, let's give it a go. And sort of ran with it. And then their first order did come in, but it was like 6 months later. And that really was transformative. Like that first month, it was something like 1,500 bottles they ordered. So every night after work, I was making all the bottles. And then the same thing happened the following month. But I think they ordered more the second month. And I was like, I can't do this. Like for the first month, it was fine. But I was like, I can't do this every month. If this is what they're going to order, that's great. But I don't know how I can't keep up with that volume.
Yeah.
After my son's bedtime and working sort of 7 till 10:30 or later every day of the week. So the thing I did then was look to get someone to help make them for me, not staff, but like outsource the production, because I had a day job, so I couldn't manage a team and didn't have the finances to be able to do all that kind of thing. So got somebody else to make the products for me instead. Yeah,
because I can imagine if you've gone from sort of fairly limited numbers yourself to suddenly having to produce that many, that there's a sort of real sort of drain on your cash flow, because you've got to pay for all the materials up front, and then you've got to pay to get it, as you say, you've brought people in. So I imagine that was quite a big challenge for you.
Yeah. So I guess, because I didn't really put any money in it to start with. So we kind of just spent £100 or something on labels, and then I was buying like really small volumes of bottles, which made them kind of expensive, I guess. But I was buying sort of 30 to 50 bottles maybe at a time, and just working through them, and then order more as and when they needed. But when that big order came through, I was like, well, I can't just keep ordering little volumes of bottles.
Yeah.
so we inquired about a pallet, and then I was like, well, how do you get a pallet to your house? Because that's what I had to do, and where are we going to put it, and all that. Um, so we had to buy the first pallet, which I think was £800. I think it cost, which was a lot of money at the time because I didn't have any money for it. So my partner actually gave me the money to do that. So we bought, between us, we bought that pallet of bottles. It arrived, and you don't think about the logistics of these things, but they dropped it off outside the house, and it was far too big. I was like, well, we'll just wheel it into the garage, it'll be fine, but didn't think about the height. So the pallet was so big, it was too tall to get through the door, and then I didn't have a pallet truck to move it into the garage either. So I had to move it. It was like 1,800 bottles or something on that pallet. So I had to move each one by one into the garage and restack them, which was fun. So, but you sort of learn about these things, I suppose, as you go.
Yeah. So you started with 3 flavours. How did you come up with those in the first place? I mean, you mentioned earlier about baking with the kids. Is that where it came from? Were they involved in the whole kind of coming up with the recipes?
Kind of, yeah. So at the time, I've just got the one son. So at the time, he was just about 2 years old, and he was very drawn to the sort of cartoon character kits that you get in the supermarket in the boxes that cost like £1 or £2 maybe now. But they've taken all the sugar and the chocolate out of them, which I guess is good on one side because it means they're slightly healthier. But it does mean you've got like 16 very bland, boring cupcakes that a 2-year-old might want to eat, but no one else in the house wants to eat them. No. And then they go out of date and you chuck them out. So it's kind of a waste of money, really. So, so we were baking from scratch. So that's what I would do. I would show them how to bake from scratch because I can do it. So we were doing that. And then flavour-wise, first, I don't know where the inspiration came from, actually, if I'm honest. I don't know. I can't remember now. I think I just liked the idea of it. So raspberry and white chocolate was the first one I did as a tray bake because I like those 2 flavours. And they're quite child-friendly as well, so he likes them. He's always been a taste tester, as has pretty much everyone in my street now. So we've got kind of at the end of a row, so I kind of have new flavours. And certainly initially, when we started anyway, I'd be like knocking on the door saying, can you try this? And everyone would try them. Or I'd post them to friends and test whether they travelled very well, because sometimes they don't travel well, and they get all mixed up in the post. So you've got to make sure that they look nice when they arrive with people if we're sending them out online. So they taste test it, and we get to travel test it, I suppose. So he's still involved, still around. He gets to bake as well with me, so he's still involved doing all these.
And the neighbours?
And the neighbours, not so much actually these days. So just because there's people in the office now that I can do that with. So so I bring them in. So they miss out now, but if they want to get involved, they can.
So you've already talked about the challenge of getting your bottles into the garage and finding the money to pay for. Were there any other challenges in particular that you faced at that early stage of the business?
Sourcing ingredients. So again, initially I was having to go in and buy every single bag of golden castor sugar that they sell in the shop, and they don't sell that much of it there. They've got loads of white sugar and loads of granulated sugar and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted golden castor because it looks nicer in the bottle. I could never get enough golden castor sugar. So I'd be driving around, I'd have to go to Asda, then Tesco, then Sainsbury's, and drive around all of them just to get as much as they've got. And I think there was one Christmas I had a big order through, and I had to basically put a shout out on Facebook. Anyone in Leeds or happens to be near Leeds, if you see golden castor sugar, buy as much as they have and I'll give you the money for it, because I couldn't get big bags. I didn't know where to get big bags of sugar from. And there were 2 ways that I found that would help with that, actually. So there's a group on Facebook that I came across called the Food Hub, and it's got people that run food companies on there. So it's from very small, just starting, or not even started, people just thinking, got ideas, through to big brands now. So some of them have started on there, and there's some big brands on there.
Yeah.
And it's just people asking random questions like that. It could be, I live in Leeds, where do I get 25 kilo bags or where do I get a big bag of sugar from?
Yeah.
And people would probably give you ideas of where to go and what to do. And I found that really useful. So I've used that quite a lot. Even now, I still ask questions on there because there's all sorts of different levels of expertise on there. But yeah, that was probably one of the first main challenges, finding where to buy stuff from.
Yeah.
And keeping up with demand. I guess those are the 2 big.
So talking specifically about your ingredients, you've talked about the difficulty of getting hold of them, but as a food business, I imagine there are a whole load of kind of considerations that you have to think about and comply with that perhaps other retail businesses might not, kind of things, weights and measures, food allergy regulations and things like that. How did you manage all of that? Did you have to bring in outside help for that?
No, so initially, well, yes, nowadays, but not so much to start with. So so to start with, registered the house as a sort of food production site, so you get like your star rating and stuff with the council, and then again on this food hub or just online, like reading around what were the regulations around labelling and traceability and things like that. And I did a food hygiene course and things myself, so at least we've got all the sort of the minimum certificates. As things progressed, as we've started selling to different retailers, they all have different requirements and bigger requirements. So I think initially it's less of an issue because you're dealing with independents, who maybe don't have the same level of paperwork, I guess, that are required, or certification, I suppose. And as it's grown, we've had to do more and more and more to get to that point. So I had to get external support on that fairly early, probably within the first year. So as we started selling, especially with that distributor, had to have certification for them.
So you've talked about how the first distributor approached you on the back of your markets, but you're now in some really very heavyweight high street retailers now. You're John Lewis. Marks and Spencer's have been a sign up with, collaboration with them. How did you? I mean, that's a dream for most small businesses to be stocked on the high street. How did you go about sort of that next step in the business to achieve that?
So for the bigger high street brands, there's a few different ways. So again, social media played a big part in it. So although we haven't got tons and tons, even now, I don't have like hundreds of thousands of followers or anything on socials, but it's quite a good product to like show in photos and videos. Yeah. It seems to be eye-catching. Certainly early days, it's a bit more, people have seen it now, so it's not quite as eye-catching maybe as it was before. But it would be, and they ran like competitions online where people could tag retailers they wanted them to be in, big or small. And if we got listed, then I'd send them a free parcel of stuff, basically. That worked to a point to get in some retailers, but it's mainly through trade shows. So doing trade shows, the first one I ever did was actually, again, I won a space at a trade show through Theo Pathetis's Small Business Sunday scheme. So at the time it was just on Twitter. Now he does it on Instagram and Twitter, but it's every Sunday you can tag him or tweet him, as it was at the time, and tell him about your business in however many words it was, I can't remember, and put a link to your website. And every week he would pick sort of 4 or 5 people brands and companies they liked, and you would then have this sort of Small Business Sunday name behind you, which I don't think is very well known, but it's quite useful because then you can say, I featured, supported by Theo Pathetis, and then once a year he runs an event, you go meet him, get a photo with him and stuff, and then you can use that in the press, which is quite helpful. So he still runs it. It's worth doing just for the sake of getting a little thing that you can use as a marketing thing. But he also ran this thing for the first year, which was to win a stand paid for by him or by his company, I guess, at the Spring Fair show in Birmingham.
Right.
And the stand there can be, I guess, for a small space, it's like £1,500. So, and I'd never even thought about it because it's more of a gift and home and leisure sort of show. Hadn't really thought about that kind of show in the past either. So managed to win a stand there, and that was the first one. So just by being at that show, I think we got about 40 new stockists.
Wow.
Just by being at that show. Most of them independents, again, small sort of gift shops and things. But really, they're like the bread and butter of the business. Like they all pay pro forma, they pay up front, and they might order little and often, but that's, from a cash flow perspective, that's good because you're getting the money through the door quite quickly. So we did that show, and then I re-signed up to it and paid for it the following. They do it twice a year, so I signed up to the next one, and then started doing other shows along those lines. And we picked up a lot of customers in there, big and small.
Yeah. So I suppose that it's not really something we've looked at a great deal in the sort of podcast before, but that actually, although initially the costs of exhibiting can look daunting for a small business, is that actually it can be a really good way of meeting, in, like you say, independents, but also bigger firms as well that are looking for something unique to stock.
It can be. I mean, the big ones go around and they hide their badges, so you don't know who they are because they don't want to get stopped by everybody, because they would do. So it's part of luck as to whether you get them, because you don't know who they are. But the cost can be, really prohibitive because they are. I mean, even now we kind of question sometimes whether it's worth doing because you can easily spend £4,000 or £5,000, which for us is a big amount. But some brands spend tens of thousands of pounds doing it. I don't know how they manage that. But so we really consider which ones we do now, whether they work or don't work. But for us, at least, it has worked. And I think if people listening haven't been before, it's probably worth going to look at the show first rather than signing up. So it might mean you don't go for a year because you've wasted it in a way by not going. But at least if you go, have a look around, see whether you think it's the right kind of place, or just get ideas as to how to display stuff, and what kind of literature you might want to take with you and that kind of stuff. So it's definitely worth doing a little bit of research. I didn't do that because I had just won the space, so I just turned up and did it. But even beforehand, I had to kind of panic and ask on that group, what do you take? Like, how do you set up your stand? So for us, it's definitely worked. I think
So you've already alluded to the fact that you struggle to get your golden caster sugar. How do you go about getting suppliers as your need for ingredients increases? How did you find your suppliers and set up negotiate the deals with them?
Yeah, so I mean, initially there was even only probably in the last couple of years, there were no sort of deals as such, negotiated pricing or anything. We just paid the list price because we didn't really think about negotiating for money. But we just found a supplier, said we probably need this much, and can they do it, yes or no? So for us, thankfully, a lot of our ingredients and stuff are kind of off-the-shelf products. Labelling less so, because obviously we've got to get that printed, but things like flour and sugar and chocolate to a point is fairly easy to get hold of. So it has worked quite easily, I guess. It's at peak time, so like at Halloween, for example, orange chocolate. It's almost impossible to get hold of orange chocolate. So you've got to plan in advance and either buy it in the summer or to sort of agree with the retailers, the suppliers, how much you might want and when. So now we've got like a forecasting tool that we use that sort of gives us a steer on that, or sometimes it's just a bit of a gut feel and we say, well, we think we need this much and we'll buy it in. But more recently, we have negotiated. So we kind of like, well, based on the last 2 years, 3 years worth of usage, we expect we're going to grow by this much. So we're going to need this many tons of flour or sugar or this many thousand bottles, whatever it is. And we can give an idea either for the year and then we can get a discount, or month on month and sort of commit to purchasing that in advance. So we've got that with almost every supplier now. We've got something in place where there's a discount structure of some kind in place. And
presumably now you're ordering those volumes, it's not being delivered to your garage. So no. I assume you've got some kind of production facility. Is that still in Leeds?
Yeah, so we've got a production facility. So we've outsourced production. So when that first big order that came through, the company that I was buying sugar and flour and stuff from approached me and were like, you do realise we can make products as well? And I had no idea of this. I just thought they supplied ingredients. So I was like, no. So I went to visit them and look at what they could do. And they agreed, they're really good actually for us from a startup perspective, because there were no minimum orders really. They would make a really small volume if that's all we wanted. That's what they do, which was good, because again, every week I'd send them a list, right, I only need 5 cases of that and 6 cases of that. So it wasn't very big volumes. And they would just do it for us because they were supplying half of, if not more than half of the ingredients. So it kind of made sense just to make it there and then. And they've got BRC accreditation as well, which is kind of really good food accreditation, which meant we could then sell to big like John Lewis and places like that. Yeah. So it opened more doors by outsourcing the production, and I didn't then have to get premises, I didn't have to get staff, and I didn't have all the stuff that comes with that. Yeah. So I kept it very small, didn't have a warehouse, didn't have anything for as long as possible, and still kept the day job for me, because I had bills and stuff I had to pay, and I didn't. All the money the company made went back into the company. Yeah. And I'd being a bit risk averse, I guess. I didn't want to just be like, right, I'm going and give up the day job and the security that gave. So I kept doing that for as long as possible until it just wasn't workable to carry on doing both. And made that job. But so now we've got our premises and we have moved to a different supplier, manufacturer for lots of reasons. But we moved to a different one just to sort of enable us to do different things.
And as you've grown, other kind of exciting opportunities have come up. I've already mentioned your collaboration with Marks and Spencer's. You've worked with a very famous pig and a very famous caterpillar in Marks and Spencer's. Yeah. How did that come about? Because that's really, quite exciting.
Yeah, well, it's a funny one, that one, actually. So again, they approached us. It was kind of a backhanded compliment in a way, because they contacted us again just through the website, and an email came through and I was like, I'm not sure if this is real, but it was. So they said they were interested, could we set up a call. So I had a call with them, and they basically said that they want this product, or they want a bottled baking type product in store. They've spoken to all their suppliers, and none of them could do it for them, so they thought they'd come to us instead. So basically, they were saying they were going to rip us off if they could. But they found that it's very hard. Like most food companies don't want glass in their factory.
Yeah.
It causes so many if something breaks, it's a big problem. They have to chuck out everything. And then most drink companies who handle glass don't want food in their factory because it's just totally different to what they do. So most of their suppliers, or all of their suppliers, couldn't do it for them. So they came to us, which is good, but I guess they would have done it if they could somewhere else. But it works really well. So the Colin and Percy kits, they launched 2 years ago, just over maybe now. And they sold out, basically. The whole sort of volume they thought they would take for the winter period, they sold out of in a couple of weeks. So then we had to panic and rush and make double the volume than we expected. And, good problems to have, I guess. But that was our busiest time of year as well for our own stock. So we were really sort of stuck on stock at that time for ourselves and them. But they flew out the door, and they've performed really well. And we've had a couple of other flavours come and go. So they've had a rainbow kit last year. There's a new one for Christmas this year. And we'll see what happens in the future. But yeah, they approached us again. So it's kind of like, I know this doesn't normally happen with most products and most businesses, but we've been very lucky in that some of these retailers have just come to us for these things, which is very fortunate.
I think if you've got the right product and it's something that's unique, you will. I mean, we talked to Mike at Crimpit, and he spoke about, a similar experience where actually the high street retailers were coming to them rather than him having to bang on doors to get their nose onto products. And, when the buyers discovered them, they found that actually loads of members of staff within the company, whether it's Robert Dias or whoever it is, said, well, yeah, we've got it at home. We love it. We should definitely stock these in our store. So if you've got the right product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is brilliant. So, and that's great. I mean, we'd have had to do knocking on the doors as well. There's been a lot of that, but yeah, in some cases, like the M&S one and John Lewis, I think even they came to us through a distributor that supplies John Lewis initially. We now work with them directly, but initially, yeah, they sort of said, we want this, go speak to them. So they did. And yeah, that's kind of where we're going with it.
So for the ones that didn't approach you, have you got any tips for listeners about approaching high street retailers? Because like I say, any small business worth their salt's going to want to get their their products in front of those buyers. Have you got any tips for listeners on that?
Again, the trade shows have helped getting contacts through. Yeah. We've had some people leave their details, but maybe never take details or could be in touch. So that's one way of doing it. Otherwise, it's building up your own contacts. So me knowing now I've done all these trade shows and things. I know lots of other companies that mainly like me, that's just like the founder of the business running it with a very small team. So it's kind of not necessarily sharing contacts, but it's maybe doing introductions. If we're in John Lewis, we can maybe do an introduction. So it's building a network of people that you can trust to help each other out. That works well. Otherwise, I mean, we've been talking to other big retailers recently, like supermarket type of customers for a different type of product that we're doing. And it's hard, like it's trying to get it through the door there, or you get so far and then they leave, and then it's hard to actually do that. So I don't know the tips other than LinkedIn. Using LinkedIn, we use that a fair bit to get contacts through that method. And I guess just being persistent. So
yeah, I was going to say that. Unpicking what you've just said is keep knocking on the doors, network, but also be persistent. I think that's a typical trait that you need to have as a small business. You need to be resilient and persistent, and just keep going. Have faith that you're doing the right thing. Yeah,
and like people will be saying no. We've had lots of people say no, and I'm sure we'll get more of that as we try to go to different markets and stuff. We're going to get no's more often, and it's trying not to take that to heart, which is easier said than done sometimes, especially if you spend a lot of time doing something. And it should be perfect for them, you think, but they just go nah, and then they move on. So it's just you have to move on, and not dwell on it too much. Maybe learn a bit from whatever they've said, but and use that for the next thing. But you've got to be resilient for sure.
Yeah. So you've alluded to it already. You've got a couple of other businesses under your wing now. You've acquired a couple of businesses. I wondered if you wanted to tell us anything about those.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah. So I mean, the Bottle Baking Co. is great, and we launched the Doggy Baking Co. I don't know when it was, about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, and that started as an April Fool's Day prank. So we did it on Instagram as this is our April Fool's Day thing. We're doing baking kits for dogs now, but it was not just a prank because we did it as we think this is a good idea, but we're not sure if people will actually buy it. So we posted it to sort of say, so if people hated it, we would go, it's April Fool's Day, and if they did like it, then we could turn it into something. And it turns out people were really keen for it. So on that day, by like 11 o'clock, it was our most viewed and liked post ever. And then we had all sorts of comments on there, and I had a couple of retailers want an order of it, even though we didn't put any pricing or no flavours or anything up. And a magazine got in touch wanting to feature it, and I was like, what's going on? Crazy. So it's performed well, so let's do it. So about 3 months later, I had to then go and like develop the actual product because we hadn't done it, and then launched it. So that's like the first offshoot of the Bottled Baking Co.
Yeah.
The problem with naming a company that's very specific, like the Bottled Baking Co., you can only really do baking in a bottle. If you do baking in a box or a tin or something, it doesn't really make sense anymore. So that's maybe one to think about if you're naming a business. I mean, it works in both ways. So it's worked really well, but then I'm sort of thinking, well, what else can you do with that name? It's kind of hard to then do a different product. So we're kind of trying to diverse a little bit because we're very gift heavy as well. So it's very seasonal. So all our cash flow is, we get a lot of revenue at Christmas and Easter, and then the rest of the year it's very quiet. You've got to build a lot of stock in the summer ready for Christmas.
Yeah.
So that makes it quite hard. So we are doing some slightly different things. So we acquired a couple of brands recently. So we took over a brand called Laura's Confectionery, who's one of the people I've met sort of doing trade shows and stuff like that. Bumped into Laura quite a few times and became friends over time, and she wanted to move on and do different things. So that's a confectionery brand that does sweets, so pouches of sweets and fudge are sort of the main product lines. So a bit more all year round. People eat sweets all the time, lots of different things, cinema trips, car trips, that kind of thing, as well as gifts. So that's why we took over that one, to help sort of with the summer season, hopefully. Needed a bit of love, needs a bit of attention. So we're still sort of working through that and looking to add new products and relaunch it a little bit. Because that was only about 4 months ago, maybe we did that. And then within the last month, there's another brand called Mon Dessert, which is in the Co-op and on Ocado as well. So they do like macaron mixes and madeleines and churros and pancakes and things like that. Kits in a box, so a bit more of a traditional baking kit.
Okay.
But also slightly different in that it's sort of slightly next level. So it's not just a brownie or a Victoria sponge or cupcake or something like that.
It's the showstopper of the baking world.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. It's almost, some of them are showstoppers and some of them are a little bit more basic, like a pancake.
Yep.
So it's kind of got skill levels from like 1 to 3, so easy to hard. And again, it's just a slightly different format to what we're doing. So it's not just, there's no point just, I could develop this, I could develop it all myself, but there's a brand there that already exists and it came up as an opportunity. So it kind of made sense from if we want to go into the detail, I guess, like from a cost perspective, I could spend a month, 2 months and spend a load of money on creating a brand or creating artwork and all that sort of stuff and doing recipes and things. Or I could spend that money or a little bit more and buy the brand or another brand that already exists. So kind of, for this one, at least anyway, it made sense to do that. Same for Laura's Confectionery, to do that. So so it's kind of like diversifying by spreading it a little bit and trying to make it a bit more all year round. Doesn't solve the Bottled Baking Co. name because that still exists. So we're going to have multiple brands, I guess, under the Bottled Baking Co. banner. But that's a good thing, I think, to keep the team busy, and it keeps us, from a cash flow perspective, more solvent, I guess, all year round. So rather than peaks and troughs at Christmas and summer.
Yeah, well, that's a key issue for, like you say, seasonal businesses, trying to smooth out those lumps and bumps of both cash flow and workload as well, I suppose.
True, yeah. So there's we've got a team of 6 people here now, so for different roles. So in the summer we are sort of not doing anything, but we're still busy, but not as busy as we are right now when it's coming up to Christmas, and everyone's probably over busy. So, but I guess that's part of small business life, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah. So winding up, my final question is, I suppose, probably one of the more difficult ones to answer, really, in many respects, because as a small business, you're having to learn so many things. But what 3 tips would you share with listeners for easing the process when you're starting your business?
I don't know. So, I mean, for me, I kept the day job, which maybe doesn't make it easier, but from a personal perspective and having money at home, being able to pay the mortgage and all that sort of stuff, I kept doing that. So for me, it was to sort of try and make a balance. So that's the really hard thing to do. So to spend time doing the business or doing the side hustle, whatever it is you're starting off as, and then also doing the day job and doing family life. So it's trying to balance those things, and you get it wrong, because I have many times. So it's trying to focus on one or the other, and sort of. So I don't know. It's trying to look after yourself. It's probably the first one. So it's kind of like make sure you're making time for yourself, which I'm guilty of not doing even today. But it's trying to do that, and not to put too much pressure on it. And I think really probably researching. With mine, I didn't have any plan. Like I say, it just sort of everything happened and evolved. It's turned into this big thing, which was never expected or planned. If I could go back now, I would probably go and plan it a little bit better, and sort of even just what am I doing for the next year? Where would I like to be maybe, or what's my plan for getting there? Because I've just never did that, and it's probably only the last couple of years I've done that. So I think making a plan, and I don't know otherwise. There's a few things in there I suppose to go off of, but those are the main things, and it's the making networks and connections and sort of using people around you. In a good way. I don't mean not using them, but like, speaking to people and sort of sharing knowledge and sort of sharing positives and negatives with each other, because there's lots of ups and downs. So it's speaking to like-minded people, I think, and sharing those things.
Yeah. Finally, can you tell our listeners where they can find the Bottled Baking Company online, where they can get hold of your goods, what retailers they might find you in?
Yeah, so Bottled Baking Co. You can get, there's the bottledbaking.co.uk website. So on there we've got bundles and all sorts of goodies on there for gifts, and we'll do personalised kits and things like that. They won't get your own name on there. Otherwise, on the high street, M&S, obviously they've got their range of kits in there now. At the moment, they've got a Rocky Road Christmas pudding kit, so it's shaped like a Christmas pudding. It doesn't taste like a Christmas pudding, it's just full of chocolate and marshmallows and stuff, which is nice. Then otherwise, John Lewis, Oliver Bonas, Clinton Cards are just about to get their first order. New Look, Anthropology, they're probably the biggest names on the high street, but also hundreds of independents as well. So the farm shops, the delis, the garden centres, chances are we're hopefully in one of the garden centres near you. So I'd support them as well. I'd support all the independents.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a really interesting chat.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you. I think it's safe to say that Greg has a really interesting startup story. He's gone from his kitchen table and local market stall to the shelves of many of our most beloved high street retailers. His journey hasn't been without its challenges though, particularly around having to scale up production almost overnight and the resulting impact that's had on his cash flow. And his point about choosing your business name carefully should have anyone at that point on their journey thinking twice before settling on their business name. But his story featured a beloved high street pig, a dragon and an April Fool's Day prank that turned into a real money spinner. So I hope you enjoyed Greg's story, and hopefully you will come away both inspired and armed with some useful tips. If you're enjoying the Start Your Own Business podcast, please spread the word so we can help even more business owners. You can find links to Greg and the Bottled Baking Company in the summary notes, and we've also pulled together some handy resources from across the donut sites that can help you on your startup journey. You can find these at www.startyourownbusinesspodcast.co.uk. Finally, another big thank you to Greg for sharing his story, time and insights. Until next time, all the best.